We're here with Matt Hudson.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to wherever this conversation goes.
I'm wondering. I feel like this could go in a million different directions here.
Yep.
Well, you are the founder, the leader, the partner, the coach, the CEO at Colorado Home Realty. So you're the first CEO we've had on the podcast.
Yeah. All right.
So that's exciting.
I'm honored.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the real estate industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to give you the short version. Maybe a little insight into personality as I grew up on an island, tiny little island, 7 miles wide, 20 miles long, not an actual rectangle. Some people have asked. Had one girl actually in high school when I had moved off the island. She said, if all the people get on one side of the island, would it tip over?
That's amazing.
Yes,
amazing.
She did happen to be blonde, but my wife is also blonde, so I'm not judging blondes. Grew up on a farm. It was 900 people on the island, small fishing village community. Sounds like it's something in the 1800s, but it was actually in the 70s. It was an amazing way to grow up, and kind of a little bit about insight into personality, I suppose, as a farm kid and college athlete. Grew up with this belief, understanding, maybe identification of myself of a lot of personal responsibility. Own your actions, own your choices, own your outcomes. I was also taught some things that actually did not serve me very well, like figure it out on your own. I had a really hard time a lot of my life asking for help. I had a really hard time seeking mentors. It wasn't until probably my early 40s where maybe my ego and my arrogance quieted enough where I could start actually seeing the people around me who I could learn from. And that became a voracious endeavor of just surrounding myself with people that I could be in deep conversation with and learn a lot from, in addition to reading all the time. Kind of fast forward, I moved to Colorado in 1999. I was in a corporate job. I was traveling all the time, golden handcuffs on, and finally decided that I wanted to get into real estate. I had been thinking about it for probably 4 or 5 years. My motivation originally was that I built custom homes in college, working for a custom home builder. And I loved it, absolutely loved building beautiful things, and thought that real estate would be kind of close to that. I actually got into lending first. So I started originating loans in late 2001, shortly after 9/11. And then got my real estate license about 4 or 5 months later. I sold actively as my only job of originating loans and selling real estate for about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years before I started my first real estate and mortgage company at the same time.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a lot.
You were working.
I'm a farm kid, college athlete, right?
Yeah.
But I grew
That's
up with this mentality of you're supposed to work.
Right.
But I also grew up with the mentality that I was unconscious of, that the more you work, the more validation you will receive. So it was all about filling a cup that can never be filled, because it was all about receiving something from other people as opposed to what I really want. And so it was shortly after I started the companies that I became a personal development coach, began the path of becoming a personal development coach. And the genesis of that was a good friend of mine who is super high level executive coach, MBA from Harvard, owns an executive consulting organization. He and I were sitting at a U2 concert at the Pepsi Center. And
that's where I do my best thinking too.
Yeah,
is at
perfect.
concerts,
Yeah.
right?
Mine's usually on a bike, but sure, Pepsi Center bike, whatever.
That's great.
And he was going through some stuff, and he was asking me questions, or I was asking him questions. We were having a great conversation, and he stopped in the midst of tears and said, "You're really good at this." I said, "Good at what?" And he said, "Coaching." I have no idea what you're talking about. I had never heard of actually having a coach before other than in sports. And so he referred me to his partner at the time, and that just kind of set me down the path of this personal development discovery. And I've always been interested in it and reading books about it, but had never really understood this professional element of pouring into and coaching other human beings. And it's become a passion of mine. I'm a behavioral science junkie. I'm just so curious about the human journey. And I would say that's a kind of a central tenet of my leadership in any organization. I've owned now 6 different companies, building companies, technology companies, 3 mortgage companies now. And the thing that I continue to peel back the layers on is answering the question, who am I? What do I stand for and believe in? What are my values? And making sure that anybody that I'm surrounded by or any organization that I'm part of operates consistent with those. And it wasn't until 2015 that I really understood that. I had one goal in 2015, and that was to define what leadership meant to me. And ultimately, I arrived at this kind of lengthy, arduous write-up for myself that I could distill down into what I call a leader's truth. And a leader's truth is, who are you and what do you value, and making sure that every decision that is made is consistent with that. And that's not about ego. It's not about arrogance. It doesn't mean not being open and receiving feedback and input and soliciting ideas, but it is about making sure that your personal philosophy, your personal principles, your personal values are honored throughout the organization. And if they are not, then you're failing as a leader. You're failing yourself and you're failing everybody else. And so fast forward to today, I own a partner in a technology company, sold off the building business in Texas, a partner in a mortgage business, and my real estate firm.
Wow.
I want to go back to
with a wife,
yes,
2 dogs and 2 kids.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. I have to ask you more questions about how to juggle all
How
that.
to juggle that.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said about leadership, because I think this is a really important point. When you are a leader, you do really difficult things and you make really difficult decisions. I think that you can do that, though, when you have an awareness of how it aligns with your values. Like, if you really deeply understand what you stand for and what your values are, you can do the difficult stuff. And I think leaders that struggle with that is when they don't have a clear definition of what they stand for, right? Yeah. And I think the other thing I want to ask you about is, how do you set those expectations with people that are in your company around what your values are? Because I also think there's a piece of, like, as long as you are defining what those values are up front, it's a lot easier to provide feedback and support when people know what that looks like on the front end. Yeah,
there's so much in your observation and your question. Maybe starting with the expectations, I would say discovering them over time. I think a lot of people wait to begin because they don't have the perfect formula of, these are all of my expectations. And then that doesn't give them the right to then provide feedback. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's actually true. I think the feedback happens when the experience occurs, and then it becomes an expectation that you simply didn't know before. Mm-hmm. And that we just need to be okay with that. But I do think that there are a lot of people, I would say myself included a decade ago, I knew what I wanted, I knew what was important to me, I didn't have the courage to honor it. And I think that's a really, like, you think about all the people that you know. Yes. Are they really honoring the truth in their relationships? Are they really honoring the truth with their clients? And it's an uncomfortable conversation, because it is a ubiquitous truth that we aren't living in a manner, like, look at our society. Yeah. Our society is so broken right now because none of us actually know what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And so we aren't even honoring it as a humanity, certainly not as a country. And yet there are individuals who try at a very high level. I think that most people know what their truth is, but are so afraid of how other people will respond to the articulation of that truth that they keep it bottled up and they stay safe in something that they know is a life that is inconsistent with what's true for them. That's where most of our pain comes from, is that I'm not living in a manner that's true with who I am. And instead, we're trying to live the life that everybody posts on Facebook, which is the perfect life. And look at me, and I Photoshop myself in a bathing suit and whatever. Yeah. Yes. And it's this false narrative. And so I think it's a combination of the discovery of what are the expectations, the discovery of what are my values, but also the awareness and maybe the ownership of, I don't in this moment have the courage to communicate my truth. And in that moment, we have only 2 choices. We have the choice of just owning that and being aware of it and learning from it and growing from it, or being a victim of it and not learning and growing, in which case we just repeat the pattern over and over and over again. As long as we'll own it, as long as we'll be aware of it, then we can recognize we made the choice. We are martyring ourselves. We are martyring our truth. And we can then walk through the experience of whatever the outcome or the consequences of that is. And it will reinforce to us not one more time. I'm not doing it again. But if we're a victim of it and we want to blame other people, we're not learning at all. We're just going to do it again, and we're going to blame other people again until there becomes that moment of awareness. So that's just the pattern that I've seen in virtually every aspect of the human experience, is being a victim or owning responsibility. One of those two in absolutely everything. I can be a victim of being 5 pounds overweight, or I can own responsibility that there was just a lot of stuff that I didn't do that led to this outcome. Mm-hmm. So, but I believe that truth, as cliche as it is, I'm sorry to use the cliche phrase, but we can all finish it, of the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And I believe that truly freedom is a human aim. And I believe that business is one of the mechanisms through which we discover and where we get the most acute and immediate feedback of who am I really, how am I really showing up in the world? Because we kind of hide it in our personal lives. But who am I really? How am I really showing up in my life? What's working? What's not working? And that it becomes that place where we grow most rapidly if we will surround ourselves with people who are dedicated to that growth as well, just like you guys are obviously doing with a podcast like this.
And it's helped a ton. And so when you are talking to one of the agents that you coach, let's say, and someone is finding themselves in that, victim role maybe, or just even a lack of awareness that they don't know their truth, like where's a good place for them to start?
I'll say where I usually start is truth with love, truth with compassion. I think that truth can be kind of like giving a kid a gun, where if somebody hasn't honored truth in the past and you're encouraging them to begin, that what you get from them is, I'll tell you the freaking truth then. And then it comes across as anger and judgment and resentment and et cetera. And the threshold to pass across is to realize that my truth is just my truth. It's just an observation. It's just an intuition. It's just a value. It's mine. It's not yours. And so as long as I'm unattached to my truth, and whether or not the other person will adopt it as theirs, then I can be 100% in truth with people all the time. The moment I become attached is the moment where it creates conflict. Now, I'm also unattached to, even if I'm communicating truth with love and compassion, I'm unattached to whether or not somebody will receive that with love and compassion. But that's up to them. I would say where an individual needs to start is not trying to be more than what they are today, and recognize that there's just a next step on their journey. I've worked on this concept of truth in my life for 15 years. And I thought 15 years ago, I was amazing at it. And I look back 15 years ago, I didn't know shit. I was terrible at it. I wasn't honoring myself in so many ways. And it's not like I was walking around lying to people. I was lying to myself. And so I think there's that first step is whatever it is that you're missing in your life, seeking in your life, it's being willing to just be in a place of awareness to start with, and not feel like you have to affect wholesale change. I think that's where people get really messed up, is they try to change too many things at once, and just put it in the middle of the table, whatever the thing is, and just stare at it for a little while. And that something magical will occur. There will be some moment of realization. It usually happens within about a 30-day period of time of, this is how this thing is impacting me. This is what I really want. Here's what I need to change in order to affect the outcomes in my life. So I would say that awareness, it really is that key. Yeah. And then, I personally believe that we don't necessarily call it accountability, but we call it exposure. The idea of exposure, being exposed to someone else. If I share with you guys, if we were going to do this in my family room, I'd probably want to go home and vacuum real quickly, because I have 2 big dogs that drag mud and other stuff in the house all the time.
And we have a 7 and 9-year-old. No need. Yeah, you're good.
So, but the idea being that when we are exposed to other people, we show up as the best version of ourselves. And so if you truly want to affect change in some area of your life, making it public and creating some element of exposure, some partnership, some sort of check-in, some sort of accountability is incredibly powerful. We've mechanized that within our organizations where there are team environments, not traditional real estate teams, what we call them strategy groups, where people get together on a weekly or every other week basis in small groups of 5 to 7, and they're assigned or choose a strategy group, and they share, here's what's going on in my personal life, here's what's going on in my business. They get pipeline reports and production reports, and they share those with each other. And it just, if we really want something, then we're not going to be afraid of making the statement that this is what I want, and we're not going to be afraid of other people observing whether or not I'm doing the work to actually achieve it. But most people are, which is why most people never actually achieve anything beyond where they are today.
Well, I think people are scared, right? Like you mentioned, people are scared of what people think of them. And I think until you start getting out there and, speaking your truth or doing something very publicly, like I can remember when I do a lot of like school district trainings. I remember the first time I spoke, I was so terrified to be in front of people. Now I can be in front of lots of people and I could care less, right? But what you realize is the more that you build that habit and you understand that like you didn't die when you did something really hard and vulnerable, it builds that muscle in you to say, hey, like if I did that thing that was hard, what if I could do this thing that was hard?
Yeah.
And I think people get stuck and they never start. And they never try that hard thing one time. And so they don't know that they're going to survive it. Right. And I think that's really a difficult place for people to be in.
I totally agree with you. And I love the fact that you said doing hard things. We have a phrase in our organization that is community is built through doing hard things. Yeah. And this actually came as a result of I was up on the island and I was helping my family with some stuff and I was chopping down a tree. And I had the choice of a chainsaw or an axe, and I wanted to actually get some exercise, so I grabbed an axe. I sharpened the axe, and my stepdad came out and said, "What the hell are you doing? I got a chainsaw."
Are you
and then
okay?
my dad came over, and he was with one of his friends. He said, "What are you doing?" And they literally grabbed lawn chairs and were sitting there watching me. And then the cousins came out, and my sister came out, and my wife came out, and my mom came out. And so literally everybody's sitting around watching me chop down a tree. And then all the cousins wanted to take a swing. And it's like community is built through doing hard things. If you really want something amazing, special, whether it's to be an incredible mother or father or husband or wife or business professional or spiritually fulfilled or have a great body that has vitality that's going to move you through life, must be around other people who are willing to do that which is necessary to achieve those objectives. And it feels burdensome. This is a phrase that was taught to me just 2 years ago. It feels like a burden to do all of those things. But I had somebody who literally grabbed my face. She put my face in her hands and she said, "It's time to know that it's an honor, not a burden."
Wow.
All of the beauty, all of the magic, all of the things that we can create in our lives is such an honor. It only feels like a burden because we're doing it for other people right now. And that's the thing that we want to stop doing. We want to do it on our own terms. We want to do it for our own reasons. But if we are in partnership with other people, we will get pushed to become the best version of ourselves that we know we want for our reasons that we're capable of. And I think that's part of the human journey, is to become the magnificence that's possible within each one of us.
So how did you weave that into your parenting?
I screwed it up so many times. So many times. Oh my gosh. I'm a really, really loving husband and father. But I will tell you, when my daughter was 4 years old, she's 20 now. She's a junior in college. And when she was 4 years old, having been a college athlete, maybe a little bit of a competitive person.
Doesn't sound familiar at all.
She came off the soccer field and she said, "Daddy, why don't I get to score goals?" And I'm literally like tearing my hair out going, "Because you need to run." Like, it's not about the airplanes or the dandelions. And it's one of my most painful moments as I reflect on it. I'm sitting there with my daughter crying. What I realized was that she was crying because she couldn't fulfill the expectations that I had of her. And it wasn't even the expectations that I had of her that I wasn't aware of at the time. It was that I needed her to be something to validate me. And the moment that I gained that realization, it makes me tear up thinking about it now. The moment that I had that realization, like I've apologized to her a dozen or more times over the years. And it's just such a great reminder of, I don't need anybody to be anything in order for me to be whole. But what I grew up with was parents, and I would say a father in particular, who loved me to death. I have an amazing relationship with him to this day. Who, as many parents do, seek their validation through their children. They live their life vicariously through their children. And it was just a story that I was unconscious of, that I had been living and that I was then projecting on my children. And so ultimately I would say, how does it make me a parent, a better parent? Not blaming myself for what I didn't know, just like we can't blame ourselves for not setting better expectations when we just didn't know. Mm-hmm. So we learn, we move on, we apologize, we fix it, we become better. And so I'd say that's the thing that I teach my kids is, one, be unattached. My son goes to a Catholic high school. I am not Catholic, by the way. There are so many rules around what you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. That ultimately is about the validation for all of the parents and all of the administration. And I just remind him, I don't care. I told him just 2 days ago, you are perfect as you are because you were born. I have no idea what your journey is supposed to be, but your journey should be your journey, not mine, not your mom's, not your teachers, not your coaches, not society's. You get to do whatever you want to do with life. If you want to be a bartender on a beach in Fiji, like, dude, I'm just jealous.
Yeah.
Like,
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yet we all follow this path. Most people follow this path of this regimented life of, I've got to make money and I've got to do these things and I've got to have a bigger house and I've got to have a shinier car. I got to make more money to buy shit that I don't need, to impress people that I don't care about, to live a life where I have more stress and more complication. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And so that's the message that I try to reinforce to my kids, that admittedly creates some confusion for them at times because they have this kind of philosophical understanding that they get from my wife and I. And yet they're living in a society that is so wrapped up in the matrix.
Sure.
And so, but this is the path that we're supposed to follow. And I think it's, rules that were just created by mankind are broken because they separate us from joy and love and connection and community and compassion. And that the real answer, at least for my kids, is have the courage to discover who you really are and live in the matrix for as long as you need to until you can figure out how to break the rules of the matrix.
That's a beautiful message. You're doing an event tomorrow, and this won't be released before that, but the topic of the event, or the name of the event, I believe, is The Art of Referral for Real Estate Agents. Yep. Can you share a couple of topics that you'll be talking about during that event?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a class that I've been teaching some version of for about 17 years. Okay. I did the first one in 2007, which is really gross to say.
Feels like yesterday.
I know. This one specifically is for real estate agents. Okay. I will say that I just taught one a week ago for business professionals. Okay. I believe that the fundamental principles of running a referral-based business transcend all industry. That part of it is the discovery of who am I as a human being? What is the disconnect between all the things that I've been taught about how I'm supposed to show up in this business and the activities I'm supposed to engage in that feel inauthentic and not genuine and that are just about getting a buck and doing another transaction. And for me, I would say the most powerful kind of underlying principle of the class itself is a desire to help individuals understand that there is a gift that they are meant to bring to the people that are in their database as part of their tribe. That is actually that gift in between transactions, the 10 years in between transactions, and that there is a way in which the individual discovers what that gift is to bring joy and freedom and value and being human on the human journey with another human being. I think the mistake that most real estate agents make is the idea that they're supposed to send real estate information to people all the time.
Right.
And it's just like the dumb stuff
See it
that
on
we do
social
in this
media
industry
all the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah.
I send you a recipe card for a pumpkin pie and you're supposed to sell your $2 million home with me. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
And so for me, it's recognizing that the vast majority of people in your database are not waking up thinking about real estate. Somewhere between 80 and 90% of them are thinking about the meaningful questions of life, whether they're conscious of it or not. And I believe one of the greatest opportunities that we have as professionals in this industry, and I believe this is part of the evolution of the industry, is to bring value in a way that has nothing to do with real estate. It's actually to pour into other human beings and share with them the magic and the questions and the beauty and the podcasts and the TED Talks and the books that are about the exploration of this thing that we call the human journey, that helps people maybe bubble up to the surface those meaningful questions that they are asking themselves that they're unaware of, or that they are aware of, but they don't have a good outlet or resources to uncover what their own belief is around the answer to those questions. And then within that, I make it very methodological. We call it the 3Ds of deepen relationships, deliver value, and demonstrate expertise. And then I walk people through the 3 groups of people that they should pour into in deepening relationships, delivering value, and demonstrating expertise. And that's your database, your pipeline, and your business-to-business partners. And then I just walk people through very specifically, what do each of those mean? Why are they meaningful? And I believe every single real estate agent listening to this has the ability, in some really simple, really beautiful ways, to do 30 transactions a year. And if you really walk through the numbers with me, it's a hell of a lot more than that. This is exactly how I ran my business. I used to do 50 to 70 transactions a year while originating 100 loans a year while running 2 companies by
My
running
brain
a
can't compute
100%
that.
referral-based business.
Mm-hmm.
Making it
I
through
was
the crash.
terrible at a lot of it because I didn't have good mechanisms in place at the time. So it was a painful period of my life. But I believe pain is where we gain wisdom to then evolve and spin out of the patterns. And there's so much I'm passionate about teaching people about how to do this in a really elegant and simple way because we just make it far too complicated.
And there's such an amazing opportunity for that right now in the market. You know, interest rates are up, home values are up. You know, it's been challenging over the past couple of years for lenders and real estate agents. And I think that is so relevant.
Yeah.
You know, those topics that you're teaching right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's been the convenience of the last few years of a lot of real estate agents were successful just because of the volume in the market.
Yeah.
With the volume being down 35%, consumers are going to be more demanding. They're going to be seeking a higher level professional. If you haven't demonstrated your value, you're going to become a discount broker because now the NAR settlement and like now we're in a phase where, and this is what we're calling it. This is the phase where professionalism rises. And I think it's a beautiful moment for the industry. It's going to be a hard and chaotic moment for a period of time, but I think it's the moment where consumers, and I've been saying this for 5 or 7 years, we needed to shine a light on the incompetence and mediocrity of this industry for consumers to demand change from the industry, because it wasn't going to happen from legislation. It wasn't going to happen from a regulatory body. And consumers through this lawsuit, well, I have lots of issues with the lawsuit itself, but consumers through this lawsuit ultimately said, we're disgusted. And so this is going to demand professionals to step into a higher level of professionalism than they ever have. And the beauty is it's actually really simple. And it just requires a commitment to being truthful and being an advocate for the consumer. And if you do that and then apply some of the principles of running a referral-based business, you make more money than you have ever made before. So that's my belief.
There's a lot of, I mean, we can't get into this for time's purposes today, but there's a lot of research around human connection and building trust and credibility and the importance of human connection. There was a study done on monkeys, and I think it was called the Harlow monkey experiment. Anyway, they basically isolated these monkeys for like a certain amount of time. They didn't let them like have connections with other monkeys or food. And so what they were trying to see is if the monkeys were going to go towards the food because they were starving or they went to the other monkeys. And immediately the monkeys went to each other. And I think that what a lot of times people forget in business, particularly when they are trying to get a quick sale or they have a scarcity mindset, is they forget the importance of human connection and how human beings are hardwired to be connected to each other. And that transfers into business, right? Like you have trust and credibility with people when you build that foundational human connection with people. And it's something that takes time, right? It's not going to be like a quick fix, but I think that has to be like a foundational component of any business.
Totally agree. I mean, I think the study itself is unfortunately barbaric that we do that to animals, but that's a separate conversation.
It was a long time ago, so
yeah, we don't do anything barbaric.
Yeah,
today.
no, never.
I totally agree with you. I do think that in a 90-day to 6-month period of time, really beautiful things can blossom in relationships that are invested in. So I don't think it needs to be this protracted, multi-year process before you can be running a referral-based business. It starts today, and you start seeing the outcome of the investment that you're pouring into people in a very short period of time. I tell people 90 to 120 days, your pipeline is going to start filling up. You're going to start getting more referrals if you will follow certain principles in your practice. The one thing that I would add that I think is going to be, I'm a big believer in this idea that the best business development is phenomenal execution. If you are not exceptional at your craft, one, I think you should just get out because you're actually just harming people.
Right.
But two, you cannot run a referral-based business. If you're bad at your job, if you can't write contracts, if you can't return phone calls, if you can't do the basics of running a good real estate practice or mortgage practice, then there's no way you can run a referral-based business. You're doing lead generation because you're not relying on relationships. And so the relationships is a component of it, but I also believe that the rise of professionalism demands a higher level of execution than, frankly, I'm really judgmental of the real estate industry in particular. And I think it is just full of incompetence and mediocrity. It's been reinforced by the structure of the National Association of Realtors focusing on size, quantity of agents, not quality of agents. It's reinforced by organizations who have the average agent that does 2, 3, 4, 5 transactions a year. You cannot be good at your job doing this part-time. And we're dealing with the largest investment of most people's lives, and we're leaving that experience to the lion's share of the agents in the industry. It's terrible what we're doing. Consumers should be pissed off at us. And so I'm actually excited about this moment of transformation in the industry, and I hope it's hard because I hope it actually gets a whole bunch of people that are not dedicated to this as a profession out of the business.
So as a loan officer, I've built my business off of service, serving and doing a great job and being top tier with execution and, pouring into my database. Of course, it could be better. But I think what a lot of us are facing right now is with rates being high and everything else being so expensive in the economy, people are shopping, and they're talking to credit unions, they're talking to, the mortgage brokers out there that are just in it for that transaction. So like how just to like shed some hope into the professionals that do hang their hat on service and being that relational person, selling value, not selling price. Like, what advice would you give? Like, how could you give us a little bit of hope?
Yeah, I suppose it's, I just wrote a 5-page article this weekend on breaking down what's happening with inflation and the Federal Reserve and what my projections are, what's going to happen with interest rates and why, and what that's doing to the housing market. We are seeing just a moment where volume of activity by buyers relative to the season that we're in is as low as we have seen in a very, very long time. Yeah. Prices are high, rates are high, but it's actually only in a segment of the market. And I think this is really important to understand. I wish I had better stats to be able to share with you guys, but as I analyze the high-end market, 1.2 million and above, volume of activity in that segment of the market is just as high as it's ever been. Part of that's because homes are just more expensive, but part of it is because the buyers in that price point just aren't as sensitive to the payment shock. where you look at volume of activity at 650 and below, and it's decimated. I mean, we're talking like 60% below where we were in 2018, 2019. Certainly well below where we were in 21, 22. So I would say the partnership between agent and loan officer must change. You know what? I'm in a mortgage business right now. I'm a partner in a mortgage business. And one of the things that we're passionate about is that the traditional realtor-lender relationship is actually a really gross relationship, particularly for the lender, because the lender gets used and abused by the agent. Don't get me wrong, there are some agents out there they're so devoted, that are so appreciative, that show up with a tremendous amount of gratitude, and there's a real business partnership. But for the most part, it's who gave me a lead most recently. It's kind of like title companies. Who gave me a lead most recently, or who bought me a martini most recently, and that's who I'm going to give my loan to. Like, that's a great way to serve your client, is to make a decision that way.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think part of the opportunity, and again, this is the rise of professionalism related to relationships, is this is one of the most important and most intimate relationships in serving a consumer in one of the most important transactions of their life. And that my encouragement to real estate agents out there would be, go deeper into your relationship and be totally devoted to that relationship. If the person that you're working with is exceptional at their craft, then own responsibility for your client's experience to help the consumer understand that the lender that you work with is simply the best, and that you as an agent have a fiduciary responsibility to protect that client and to guide them as you being the consultant or the advocate for them through every aspect of the process. Would you let them hire one inspector over another, or one structural engineering company over another, et cetera, et cetera? Well, why do you just go hands off with what is half of the real estate transaction, which is the loan? And so I think part of this is agents getting better at articulating why lending matters, why the quality of lending versus 0.1% to rate or $300 to closing cost is not the way you make a decision around this particular transaction. And so I'd say a little bit of education of the agent, but I go back to that concept of truth, of lenders leading agents and saying, here's what I need out of our relationship, and here's how I think it best serves the consumer. And ultimately helping agents understand, and I think this is a really important, it's a little opaque, maybe a little esoteric to most people, but I think that in beginning to understand that when we really partner that way, that what happens is we create a remarkable experience for the consumer. And when we create a remarkable experience, the experience then is more referable. And when that experience is more referable, that the loan officer can start owning some responsibility for actually asking for referrals for the agent, because the agent is not doing it for themselves. Even I didn't do it. I hated asking for referrals. I loved setting the expectation of referrals, but I hated asking for them. And so I think there's this really potential for a beautiful and evolving dynamic of partnership between agent and loan officer, where agents are going to need to be looking for a higher level of professionalism in their own business and in their partnerships, and ultimately understanding that that kind of ethos that they commit to in their business will actually drive a better business, more referrals. It's not about the lead that you get from the lender. It's about the partnership that creates the experience that builds a referral-based business that adds 5, 7, 10 more transactions a year over time when you do it really well.
Yeah. Great point. Great advice.
Part of being a great leader is being able to lead yourself, right? And lead yourself effectively. What are a couple of things that maybe you do on a daily basis in your morning routine or in your routine in general that you feel like are beneficial to you being able to lead yourself so that you can lead others?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is I screw up all the time. And that there's such, like, we're just human. Mm-hmm. We're all human. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's this kind of avatar of what we expect a leader to be, that they're living some perfect life. Yeah. And that puts people on a pedestal, and which I'm not afraid of. I live a great life, but I'm just human. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that the deepest commitment that I have to myself is personal responsibility. The moment that I am frustrated by something, in fact, I was handed this really inconvenient phrase about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. And that is, frustration is an excuse for poor leadership. And so anytime I'm frustrated, what I've learned to do, look at myself, and to own responsibility for if my pants don't fit or I can't run a mountain or whatever it might be. If I'm frustrated with another individual in my life, the question that I always come back to is, what decision have I not honored that I knew I should have honored? And that every moment, and I really do feel like every moment, this is probably one of the most powerful things that I've learned to do, is that every moment of pain is a moment that I settle into instead of trying to avoid pain. If you guys haven't read The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, by the way, great book. Yeah. We actually interviewed him a couple of years ago in my company. Every moment of pain is something that as a society, we have learned to numb out from. We pour a glass of wine, we take a shot of whiskey, we turn on a rerun, we eat some potato chips,
no
whatever
silence.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as opposed to sitting in it, and what I've learned to do is to sit in the moment of pain and to ask myself the question, what am I meant to know? What am I meant to learn? What am I meant to let go of? And what am I meant to become? Those 4 questions. And that I will sit in that for as much as a 30-day period of time. I'm a really impatient human being, so that's hard. But I've learned that there's just every single time, there's some incredibly powerful discovery. And what it does is it inspires me then to remember what's most important. And so every day, I got my journal and I write lots. And every day I ask myself the question, what's most important? Sometimes it's working on my body. I almost died from COVID 2.5 years ago. I was in the ICU for 7 days. I got diagnosed with cancer 8 months ago. I've got melanoma and I've had surgery and lymph nodes taken out and I got a PET scan in 2 days. And yet I don't think about those things at all. I use them to propel me to what's the magic of the journey that I want to live. And those moments, as we were talking about before we went on, those moments remind us that there is, I've been living my life unconsciously relative to other people's expectations. How do I want to be conscious of the journey that I want to have as a human? That then propels all of my action, all of my behavior. I try to get all the hard stuff out of the way before noon, and then it gives me the rest of the day to do whatever it is that I need to do. I do my writing in the morning. I do my workouts in the morning most of the time. I set my intentions for the day first thing in the day. When I don't do those things, my day literally just controls me, and it's just absolutely crazy. So, but I'd say the biggest question that I ask every day is, what are my intentions for the day? And it's not just about what I'm going to accomplish, but it's about who do I choose to be today. And I think Thursday or Friday of last week, that I sent a text to a friend of mine, and I just said, nothing but love and light today. Like, just be the intention of every meeting that I was in, every conversation I was having. It was just the reminder of just show up as compassion and joy in other people's lives, no matter what's going on, no matter what the conversation is. Completely changes my experience, and the impact that I have and the partnerships that I create and the relationships that evolve is remarkable when you remember that sort of thing. Otherwise, we show up in ego, we show up in arrogance, we become judgmental when we actually cause divide in relationships.
Why should an agent choose Colorado Home Realty?
Because we're awesome. I would say most people shouldn't. We have a very refined culture. We have a very refined set of values. People can't hide at CHR. It's not Big Brother sort of stuff, but it is high-level expectation of who do you want to be in your life, and who do you want to be as a professional. I tell people straight up when I interview them that, look, if all you want to do is sell real estate, I'm out. There's some other good places that do real estate well. If what you want to discover is what is the magic of the human journey that I know is just a little opaque to how I'm living my life, and I must discover that, that's who we are. That's what our culture is. It was 2009 where for the first time I asked the question, why do we exist? What is our purpose? And it was, at the time, we described it as helping people discover extraordinary. I didn't really know what that meant, and I was making it too much about the company. Just my personal passion is that there is a magic to this human journey that most of us don't ever even have the gift of asking the question about, let alone set foot on the path of seeking the answer. And we're just happen to be pretty darn good at it because it's a personal passion of mine, and I won't be in any organization, I won't be affiliated with any organization that doesn't have the human being and the human journey as a central part of what makes the organization itself tick. Now, we're not amazing at it all the time. There are times where we go off track and we derail, but I would say it's what makes us tick as human beings, and it's the central part of our culture. And so if an individual is scared, unwilling to be vulnerable, doesn't have enough humility, then we are definitely not a fit. If they want to run an amazing referral-based business, being surrounded by people who are exceptional at their craft, we've got a 10-person marketing team. We've got amazing technology that we screwed up for a while, by the way, but we've made it amazing again. We have an incredible culture of people. But, being a farm kid and a college athlete, I expect people to wake their own ass up and go do life in their own way. If they need me to coddle and coach and stroke them all the time, nope, I'm out. I tried that. Didn't work. It's not who I am. But there are, I wish there were more, but there are a handful of really good real estate firms around. We just happen to be one of them. Our agents produce at a really high level. We're one of the top producing firms in the Colorado market in per person production. And most proud of the culture and the human beings.
I love how clear you are on that. Like it's very cool to listen to you be able to define that so clearly, because I know that shows in the way that you make decisions.
I had to make 1,000 mistakes that I said that I wasn't going to make in order to ultimately discover it. It goes back to that: who are you as a leader, and identifying your own values and finding the courage to honor those values, and to be able to say, this is who we are, this is who we are not, and if you aren't this, it doesn't make you wrong, just makes you wrong for here.
Yep.
Go be who you are over there that aligns with that. My big goal is some contribution to changing corporate culture in America. Like, I think organizations hire based on pedigree and resume, as opposed to values and philosophy and ethos. And certainly there needs to be a core competency there to be able to do the job. And then people seek a better commission plan or a better compensation plan. And really what they're doing is they are seeking, maybe those things are true for some people, but I think for most people, what they're really seeking is, if it's going to suck this bad, I better be making more money.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
And 78% of America hates their job. So I see this tremendous opportunity for an evolution of humanity in the way that we're using business to be an expression of our gifts and an expression of the purpose for which we exist in the first place. And then when you help people discover that, the joy that they end up creating and then the outcomes that they end up producing are really remarkable. Their life just transforms. So that's what lights me up.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
2-part. 1, what's one book you would recommend that you have just loved deeply and has impacted your life? And then the second part of that question is, if you could write your own book, what would it be about?
Okay. So the first book that comes to mind, written by a guy named Eric Greitens. Eric was I believe, Oxford PhD. He was also a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
Led his squad. There was some sex scandal, by the way. He was a governor, I think, of Arkansas, maybe. But the name of the book is Resilience. And the book is a series of letters that he wrote to one of his Navy SEAL brothers who was in prison and was dealing with serious PTSD and alcoholism and et cetera, et cetera. And so he just shared this series of letters. And there's so much, talk about a warrior poet, like showing up with tremendous compassion and insight into humanity. And it's like, literally, I found myself dog-earing a page and then flipping the page and then having to double dog-ear and then underline. And every page was dog-eared. It was just, I bought 300 copies and I just gave them to everybody I ran across.
Cool.
Really, really powerful book. I probably read that, 5 years ago for the first time.
I'm gonna check that out.
And then, the book that I would write is A Leader's Truth. That's actually the title, is A Leader's Truth. I haven't been compelled to do so. I had a list of 17 books that I thought I was going to write. But it was all ego-based. It was all seeking validation for writing a book and having my name on it and being known and blah, blah, blah. Now I just don't care. But I have a feeling that there's a moment coming where I'm compelled to just share something. But this is such a great way to do it, and I don't like typing, so this maybe is easier. I do have voice recognition software.
There you go.
So a leader's truth.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. We could talk to you for hours, and maybe we'll do another episode. I'd like that.
I'd enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. Where can our listeners find you?
I don't know.
Well, I found you can just type in Matt Hudson, CHR, Colorado Home Realty, and there's a lot on you there. You've got your website there. So if our listeners want to go check you out, I think that would be a good place to find you. And we'll put a link to your website when we post this as well. But it was great chatting with you. Thanks so much. And thank you all for listening.